Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You are tuned in to the JMOR Tech Talk Show, and we'll be starting momentarily. This is the place to ask those questions about PCs, technology, challenges with your iPhone, perhaps pairing it to your car, or maybe those smart devices that are supposed to make life easier at home or in the office, but just don't seem to. And now, please help me welcome the CEO and founder of the JMOR Connection Incorporated and the star of tonight's show, Mr. John C. Morley. Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is John, and welcome to another episode of the JMOR Tech Talk Show. Tonight, I was trying to think about, what I want to talk about. And, we've been getting lots of questions, I'm going to say, over the past week to the past month. And what they were entailing is basically, when we talk about the word RAID, what do we really mean? And I think it's interesting because a lot of people get a little convoluted by what the word RAID means. And so what I want to do tonight was to take a moment and to just explain what do we mean when we talk about RAID. So RAID stands for those of you that may or may not know, actually redundant array of inexpensive disks. So a RAID system can consist of a lot of different configurations, 0, 1, 5, 6, and 10. And we're going to go through those in just a moment. But what I want to do, ladies and gentlemen, is to invite you to call in the JMOR Tech Talk Show. You can call us during the show between 9 o'clock and 9:57. And the way you do that is to just pick up your phone and dial 973-826-0981. That's 973-826-0981. And we'll get your call on the air and hopefully get to talk to you. So tonight, when we're talking about RAID is usually involved when we talk about servers. So it's redundant array of inexpensive disks. So there are different kinds of RAIDs. There usually are hard disks. And many years back, they actually had been only used as SCSI. We won't get into that too much, but because the SATAs actually are now very reliable and the eSAT very reliable. Some people are doing RAIDs with SSD. I'm not a big believer of this. Now, of course, if you spend a lot of money, you can buy an SSD drive from, let's say, around $100 to an SSD drive for the same capacity that might be twice the amount of money. Well, what's the difference? First of all, the warranty is number one. The second is the quality of the drive, okay? So, yes, I will tell you that of all the components you have, even though there is no moving parts, SSD drives do go bad. In fact, they go bad a lot faster than a movable drive. Now, I know that seems ridiculous, but I'm talking about if you buy the low-end type of RAID. An average SSD drive will basically last you, the lower-end drives, if they say they're 2 to 3 years, well, they're going to start failing in 2 to 3 years. How do you know a drive's failing? Pretty simple. You're going to start to notice your computer getting really, really slow. You've done scans to make sure there's no viruses, there's no spyware on your computer, and you're checking things and everything seems to be fine, but it's just taking a long time to load pages, and it's always seeming to take a long time every time it accesses the disk. So that's one key. So there are different kinds of RAID configurations, ladies and gentlemen. And again, they're mostly found in servers, but that doesn't mean they're only in servers. They can be in high-end workstations, such as engineering workstations. Maybe be using them for CAD, computer-aided design. Maybe you'd be using them for some type of a processing system where it's really critical. So the type of RAIDs we've got something called RAID 0, RAID 1, RAID 5, RAID 6, and RAID 10. Now, many of you are probably familiar with RAID 0 and RAID 1. So there is what we call software RAID, and there's hardware RAID. So software RAID is done by the software to manage it. RAID is done by a controller that actually has firmware, which is software, but it's on the hardware, so it's actually a lot faster. It usually has cache, so it's able to do a lot better job in a short period of time. Now, RAID functionality, again, reduced array of inexpensive disks, can be controller-based. They can be on a separate controller, such as what we call a RAID controller, or they can be simply a driver, like in Windows 2012, now 2016 Server, as well as on Mac X systems. Yes, on Mac. They can include software RAID functionality or hardware RAID, as I was talking about. So back in the time, there were RAID systems that were only SCSI. Okay? Now, I know what a lot of you are saying to me, John. What are you talking about when you mention the word SCSI? I'm not talking about anything that's disgusting or anything like that, but SCSI it still stands for Small Computer System Interface. It's basically a parallel standard interface standard. It was developed by the American National Standards, the ANSI, for basically attaching printers, disk drives, and scanners, and other types of peripherals to computers. It's pronounced SCSI, S-K-U-Z-Z-Y is how you'd say it. So this was a very familiar. Many of you might be familiar with things like Windows NT 4.0. You might have been familiar with Novell, NetWare. And back then, the only thing that they would support when you were on a server base was SCSI. That's what they supported. They didn't really have drivers for anything else. So again, that's kind of where it's come. So what they've been able to do with RAID, which is kind of cool, is they've driven the cost down on RAID to less than half because SCSI drives were really, really expensive. So RAID is a great way to have reliability, and for just a little bit more money, you can expand your RAID to do different things. So there are standards in the organization, as I mentioned. So there's one type of RAID, ladies and gentlemen. It's called RAID 0. Basically, you have two drives, and they're kind of divided into blocks. And each drive gets written across the drive in the array. Basically, they use, let's say it's a RAID 0 and you have at least two drives. Each drive is written at the exact same time, or let's say they're simultaneously written to. So it's great. It has fast I/O. It doesn't have a great quality, though, for reliability. It's mostly done for speed. That's the main reason that people do RAID 0. RAID 0, again, has great performance in reads and writes. There's not a lot of overhead in RAID 0. Storage capacity, like I said, there's no overhead. RAID 0 is not fault tolerant. So guess what happens, ladies and gentlemen? If one drive fails in your RAID, ouch, you just lost your entire system. Now, when we're designing systems, ladies and gentlemen, we generally build two different kind of RAIDs. Not to get too much into that, but generally we'll build an operating system if it's not a virtual machine, unlike a RAID 1, and then we'll build our data in another type of RAID that'll be separate. But again, the only time I would use a RAID 0 is if maybe you were trying to build a performance machine and there was no concern for any type of redundancy, but you just wanted a faster computer. So that would do that. Now, I have to tell you, the SSD drives are very, very fast. But if you understand that there's going to be a higher probability of failure with the SSD, especially if you buy lower drives, now, that is going to change as standards evolve. But I just want to let you know that I've owned several SSD drives, and I've had them back when they were first coming out, and back when you paid $500 for only a 128 gig hard drive, which was quite a bit. Now you can buy that drive for, a lot cheaper. The thing about SSD drives is that they're categories, is the best way to explain it. You have low quality, you have middle quality, you have high quality. Well, the high quality could be over 2 times the price, but they're made with better quality components. The best way to explain this, ladies and gentlemen, is let's think about batteries for a second, okay? Now, many of you may or may not know that batteries have a certain amount of times they can be cycled. Both on sometimes they'll be cycled for a full charge, a half charge, 3%, 4%. It all depends on how many times they're actually cycled. And by cycling your battery, it actually depletes the life of the actual battery. So that's really important about to understand that. So when each time, let's say this particular battery has a lifespan of 12 full cycles, they can recycle. But it might have a battery life of 40 that might be half cycles, or it might have, or 20, let's say, there'll be 20 cycles that would be like half, and maybe it would have 40 that would be like a third. So what does that mean? Each time your battery recharges, it takes away from its active lifespan. Okay. So same thing happens with the SSD drives, ladies and gentlemen. Now the manufacturers don't want you to know this, but they're not made as well as the mechanical hard drives. I'm sorry. They want you to think they are, and if you pay the top amount of money, yes, they'll be close, but they're still not going to outlast most mechanical drives. And now we've got drive standards by companies like WD that are even gold. I mean, you probably know they had the green drives, right? Then they had the, you actually had the blue drives, okay? So the greens were like 1 and 2, the blues were like 2 or 3. And then you got into another level of black, which had like a 5-year. And now you get into the gold, so they're even more. So that's kind of, what's been happening. Now, if you were to look at actually a typical Western Digital gold drive warranty for most systems that you're looking at, you're going to find that it's 5 years. Now, if you're looking at a WD, again, a WD green drive right now, a WD green drive warranty at this point in time would actually be a lifespan. They're actually putting it through with a very limited span. And they're actually saying that the green drives are, I don't want to say they're the bottom of the barrel, but they're made with energy conservation and all this nice stuff, and they sound great. But the WD drive, the black, does live more than the green. So, that's kind of on the standards and how they're made. So the WD green drive, which we're talking about right now, is a drive that a lot of computer manufacturers were using for a while. We actually didn't use them. And the reason we didn't use them is we found out for just spending a few dollars more, okay, whether it was $20, $30, $40 more, we felt that it made sense to put that extra few bucks in the drive because time is money, and we also want to make sure that our clients get the highest quality of product. So we weren't here to nickel and dime and save those couple nickels and pennies because in the long run it was just going to cost us more money and it was going to aggravate the client. So we want to do the right thing. So they have the WD, the other drive they have is the WD Blue. And the WD Blue drive has been used by a lot of major manufacturers that you probably know. And it typically has a 2-year warranty. So then we get into the we have the blue drives, and then after the blue drives, we actually get into the black drives. So the black drive warranty was actually pretty cool. The black drive started giving a lot better warranty. So the WD black drive is one that again was considered to be like the creme de la creme for computers. And if you had that in a desk computer, that was like amazing, okay? So the WD Black was doing a 5-year, and the WD Gold now, which is kind of like the new standard. So the WD Gold drives can deliver up to 10 terabytes. So that's pretty cool, especially for data centers, and you're still doing a 7,200 RPM, which is great. So if we had to say right now, if you asked me a question, what is the difference between a WD Black drive, hard drive, again, all mechanical, and a WD Gold drive, okay? And if you were to ask me that question right now, I bet you'd probably press and say, gee, what is the difference? Well, the WD Gold is really pushing that new terabytes, 2 terabytes. So what is the difference? So if you buy the 2 terabyte drive for storage, gaming, and a bit of editing, it can seem a little daunting. So you could pick a black, or you could pick a new. Most of the people tell us that you should buy black for gaming since it's made for home desktops. But the Enterprise Gold has much better stats and price is just a little bit more than the Gold. So the WD Gold will perform better than any black in a home desktop here. I mean, that's like the creme de la creme drive. Now, that drive has a 5-year warranty as well, so it is better. But the other drive that I want to tell you about is there's something called the WD Purple drive. So what is a WD Purple? So the WD Purple is actually a 3-year drive. Okay, and if we were to compare the WD Purple versus the WD Black, the differences that we would see is that, you know, a WD Purple drive, okay, would be almost, I'm going to tell you, it'd be like, not quite 1/2, but maybe if a drive was like $50, it would probably run just around 120, so maybe like 1.2. So the WD Standard Purple are drives, they're recommended for surveillance systems. They're great for using up to 32 cameras. The Purple drives come with a 3-year warranty, but again, when we're talking about data for surveillance systems, that's a very, very intense operation and a lot of writes and rewrites, more than computers and more than some servers. So capacities for the Purples can range from 1 to 6 terabytes. So they're very affordable. They are slightly more expensive than the red and the green drives. That's important. So what is a WD red drive? Let's look at a WD red drive warranty. So a WD red drive warranty, they're specifically designed with RAID error recovery to control, reduce fallouts with NAS systems. Desktop drives are not typically designed for RAID, but if you have a RAID, that would be what that is. WD red drive versus a WD black drive. Let's look at those differences. So a red drive is typically 1 to 8 drive storage. They're very similar to the green drives in that they're tailored for very quiet, low power operation. The performance they're supposed to be a little better than the green versus the green is I would tell you that the digital on the green, you'll probably see that the reds, they're similar to the green, okay, but again they're quiet, and the big thing about them is that, you know, they're pretty available. And again, it helps drive that cost down. So a lot of people want to compare a red drive, ladies and gentlemen, to a black drive. I get this question a lot. And if we were to compare, and I know we're here to talk about RAID tonight, we might have to talk about it more next show, but it's just important to understand the kind of the nomenclature and the let's say the background of drives. So if we're thinking about a hard drive, and there's black, okay, for gaming, and then there's also red. So red is marked for the NAS crowd, but the black editions are performance-oriented drives, and that's a drive that's much better. It's all about saving a few pennies. That's really what it's about. I like the black. I've loved the black since the gold came out. I'm in love with the gold. The gold is slightly better than the black. I mean, I'm not going to say it's 100 times better, but I find that the gold is a nice drive, but if you're building a PC, the black is a great drive to use. You'll probably change your SSD drive at least 1 or 2 times or 3 times over the life of how long a typical WD black would last. I know, but I will tell you that the access rate on an SSD is much, much faster. But unfortunately, every time it clicks and it goes through, you're wearing out your drive. So they haven't really made the drive, I'm going to say they haven't really made it that durable. Yes, it works day to day, but if you're using it and crunching it, I've done so many tests on these, they fail. Even with the $1,000 drive, they may not fail in a year or 2 years, they may fail in 5 years, but they fail. And they fail a lot more than the percentages of a mechanical drive. It's just the way the mechanical drives work, and they hit and they use the platters, and not to bore you with all the the talk about this and the magnetic and how it works in setting the zeros and ones, it's less obtrusive, which I know seems weird, than the SSD. The SSD is causing an electrical charge. Now, so is the mechanical drive, but there is less of a field disruption than there is in an SSD. In an SSD, there's just a lot more damage to an area. So that's the best way to explain that. I hope I haven't confused anybody. But again, if you'd like to call us during the show tonight, you can reach out to us at 973-826-0981, and we would love to talk to you. That's 973-826-0981. We're talking tonight about hard drives, the type of hard drives, and we're talking about the different RAIDs. If you just joined us, we talked about RAID 0. It's a great drive to have for non-redundancy. It's mostly for speed. So let's look at the first level for redundancy. Typically in an operating system for a server, basic server, it'll be a RAID 1 on the operating system. The data is stored twice, okay, by writing them both to the data drive and to another drive. Okay, so there's a second drive. If one drive fails, the controller uses the either data of the drive to mirror the drive for the data recovery and continuous operation. You need at least 2 drives for a RAID 1 array. Okay, that's typically how that works. So RAID 1 is excellent, has great speed, write speeds comparable to that of a single drive. If a drive fails, data does not have to be data do not have to be rebuilt. They have to just be copied to the replacement drive, pop a new drive, and you're up and running. RAID 1 is a very simple technology, but there's some disadvantages of it. The problem with it is that the capacity is only half of the total capacity because all data gets written twice. So if you have 2 drives and you got 2 terabytes and 2 terabytes, okay, you've actually got not 4 terabytes, you've got 2 terabytes. All right, so that's how that works. When you do a RAID 0, it's not fault tolerant, as I said to you, and it should never be used for a mission critical type system. So RAID 1 is great, but remember something: you're getting the overhead because you're cutting the drive down by they have to be exactly the same size, and you're actually cutting it down. So if you got two 4s, you only have 4 terabytes, for example. Or 2 1 terabytes, you've only got 1 terabyte. So RAID 1 is great for mission-critical storage systems, accounting systems, most small servers and offices. It's great for that. So the next type of RAID I'd like to talk about, ladies and gentlemen, is something called a RAID 5. Now, a RAID 5 is popular in what we call the secure RAID environment. You have to have at least 3 drives, but it can work with up to 16 drives. So the data areas or the data blocks, they're written across the drives in one drive with a parity, with like a checksum, and then all those blocks, the block data is written. Pretty easy. So the data basically blocks, they're striped across all the drives, and on one drive is the parity checksum. Pretty easy, right? So the parity data is not written to any fixed drive, so the computer can just basically recalculate it. So again, what it's doing, just to back up here, is the data blocks are striped across the drives. Okay, that's how it works. And then the parity data are not written to a fixed drive. They are spread across all the drives, okay, for the different write procedures. So the parity data can recalculate the data of one other data block should those other datas no longer be available. So RAID 5 array can withstand a single drive failure without losing data or access to the data. Now, RAID 5 can be a little tricky. It can be achieved in software or hardware. A lot of times I'll recommend that it is hardware since it is a little more overhead, and it can basically the overhead can be a cost of access and writing because of all the extra calculations it has to be achieved. And to put that in software, you're just going to be taking that away from your processor and from your memory. So if you are doing a software RAID, I'd make sure that you have a good processor and that you have plenty of RAM to be able to handle that, because otherwise your operations, especially on servers, are going to be really slow. So RAID 5 can be achieved, as I said to you, in software or hardware, but I recommend it being in hardware, especially with a nice amount of cache. Now, extra cache, as I mentioned to you, like memory, is really recommended. Even if you're using any type of hardware controllers, it's always great to improve that, because you'll improve the write performance. The read is never the problem. It's the write, because it has to do some extra manipulations and calculations to be able to get what we're actually talking about. So what are the advantages of a RAID 5? Well, again, we said that you can have, in a RAID 5, you have to have at least 3 disks in a RAID 5, but you can go up to 16. So the advantages, things that are written onto RAID drives, like transactions, are a little slower, okay? But it's slower the other way, but the way it's working with a RAID 5, the read data is very fast, okay? But the write data is going to be a little bit slower. So RAID 5 is great for an application where maybe there's some data entry put in, but a lot of it is being used for recalling data. And that's great, especially like a lookup system. Again, there'll be some data entry, ladies and gentlemen, but it's important to understand, and we're not talking about data modeling here tonight. We're just talking about the different technologies. So the disadvantage is obviously that the write transactions are somewhat slower than the reads, okay? The other disadvantage is it can obviously affect the computer's throughput. And this technology, if one of the disks, let's say, was using a 4 terabyte disk fails and it's replaced, the amount of time to restore that data, everybody sit down, can take a day or longer, depending on the load of the array, the size, and the speed of your controller and cache, etc. So if just another disk goes bad during that time, the data is lost forever. Everybody understand how that works? So if one disk in an array fails, it's replaced, restoring the data could take a lot of time, but if 2 disks fail in a RAID, well, you're toast, okay? It cannot recover from that. So RAID 5 is a good system. It's efficient, has great security, performance is fairly reasonable, and it's great for file and application servers that have, let's say, a number of data drives. We'll use RAID 5 on small office servers for their data partitions. It's a great way to manage the data. So let's talk about RAID 6. So RAID 6, remember RAID 5, just to recall again, RAID 5 works by having 3 drives up to 16, and it actually works, ladies and gentlemen, by taking the data blocks and striping them across all the drives, and one drive is a parity checksum of all the blocks and data that is written. Okay, so the parity data is not written to a fixed drive, they're spread across all the drives. That's important to note. Now, in RAID 6, the parity data is written across 2 drives, which means that it requires at least 4 drives and can withstand 2 drives dying simultaneously. So in a RAID 5, if 1 drive fails, we're okay. In a RAID 6, if 2 drives fail, we're good to go. Okay? It can sustain 2 drives out of the RAID failing. So it's very similar to RAID 5, but it has a little bit more resilience. So the chance of 2 drives breaking is not quite that popular. So if, let's say, if a drive in a RAID 5 system dies, is replaced with a new one, it takes hours or it could take a day to rebuild. Okay? If another drives during that time, then you still lose your data. With RAID 6, the RAID will survive the second failure, which is kind of great because you can still use your data and you can still keep rebuilding, and you don't really have a problem. So there are advantages, like with RAID 5, the read is fairly fast, and again, if 2 drives fail, you have access to all the data, even while we're rebuilding. So RAID 6 is more secure than RAID 5. What are the disadvantages? Well, with RAID 6 is going to be slower than RAID 5, because there is more overhead with more calculations, because the additional parity has to be written. It's actually going to be around 20 to 25% slower is what the standards are. drive failures that result, remember, it can sustain 2 failures and be okay. So it's still acceptable. But because of the complex technology, rebuilding an array on one of these drives when it fails can take a very, very long time. So RAID 6 is good. It's an all-around great solution. It's more, let's say, resilient for failure because it could have 2 drives fail. And it is going to be a little slower, but again, you have a little more overhead and you have a little more peace of mind. So let's talk about a RAID 10, okay? So if we combine a RAID 1 and a RAID 0, it's possible to combine the advantages and disadvantages of a RAID 0 and a 1 in one system. So this is a nested or a hybrid RAID, and it provides security by mirroring all the data on the secondary drives while using striping across each set of drives to speed up the data transfer. So we actually call that a RAID 1 plus O. If something goes wrong with one of the disks in a RAID 10, the rebuild time is really fast, and there's not much time needed to copy all the data to the surviving mirror to the new drive. There's some disadvantages. If half of the storage capacity goes to mirroring, compared to the large RAID 5 or 6, it's a very expensive way to have redundancy. Really, really expensive. So RAID is, I want you to understand something about RAID. RAID does not mean that you do not have to have a backup. And it looks like Brian's giving me that sign. So we need to go to a quick break. You stay right where we are, and we'll be right back after this break. Computers always slow at your home or office. Pop-ups always appearing. Setting up smart devices like your iPhone, thermostats, downloading apps, and much more. Mention code JRC001 and receive a PC tweak for only $49.99. New clients only, please. Visit JMOR.com now. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening to the JMOR Tech Talk Show right here on the Starcom Radio Network. That's Thursday nights, 9 p.m. to 9:57 p.m. right here on Starcom. You can tune to us at any of the many stations by going to starcomradio.com and just clicking right there on the stations and getting the station list. Or you can actually just go to starcomradionetwork.com and streaming us live anytime from your phone or from your computer. And, of course, if you're listening to our show on a Thursday night, 9 p.m. to 9:57 p.m., we invite you to pick up the phone and give us a call at 973-826-0981, where we not only talk about computers and technology, we talk about how technology changes and improves the quality of our life, and we also give you some tips about how to avoid pitfalls in technology as well as security loopholes that you need to be concerned about. So that's kind of where we're going, and I want you to understand that there are so many things happening with technology, and we stay abreast of them so that you can learn about them. In fact, just next week, we've actually been invited to an exclusive event with Google, and we'll be sharing the information that we're allowed to share with you. I know some of the information is confidential, so we won't be able to share all that information, but we'll be able to give you a lot of information and give you some ideas about where things are going with Google. So we're really excited about that next Tuesday. And on Thursday's show, we'll share some of those things. They're going to be focusing a lot on the cloud, and we're going to give you some insights on that. So we're talking about RAID, reduced array of inexpensive disks. But I want to let you know, ladies and gentlemen, that a RAID is not a backup, and you should never constitute that it is a substitute for one, because if you do, you're in for a real serious failure. So all RAID, offers protection against one drive failing, except for RAID 0. Remember this, ladies and gentlemen. I can't tell you how many clients we've gone to, and a previous technology company set up a RAID 0, told them it was fault tolerant, and guess what? It wasn't. It was only, a RAID 0 was only for performance improvement. That's it. So, a RAID 6 can survive 2 drives failing simultaneously. And with security, you still need to back up the data from a RAID system. A RAID 5 system can sustain a 1 drive failure, but a RAID 6 can have a 2, and a RAID 10 is a 1+0. So there are other RAIDs out there. We're not going to get too into them. There's the 2, the 3, the 4, and the 7. They exist, but they're not that common. 3 is like a 5, but it's with the parity data written to the same drive. So just wanted to give you a little bit of a heads up to how that works. So there's a couple ways that, again, this can be accomplished. You can accomplish using RAID with a backplane controller. You can put a RAID card in there. Intel supports RAID. There's LSI. Under LSI, there's Mega RAID. The one caveat that I want to warn everyone about, if you're not familiar with RAID, is when you get into a RAID utility and you start changing the RAID configuration. Okay? Be very, very careful before you save anything or do something. Because if you change sometimes just one thing, you might have blown away all your data. So be very, very careful, ladies and gentlemen. We've had a few clients where they went in there and they thought they were just reformatting a drive. Well, they thought that, but apparently they blew away the whole RAID, and we had a serious problem. Thankfully, we had backups, and they called us, and we knew exactly what to do. So RAID is not new, ladies and gentlemen, and if you have a server and you're implementing it in one of the best practices possible, you're going to have some type of a RAID. Most servers will have at least 2 sets of RAID, sometimes more, and then always have some type of a backup plan to go from there. So when we're talking about technology, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about RAID, we're talking about hard drives. Sometimes the RAID controllers will have their drivers built right into the system that you're loading, the operating system, server, etc. However, sometimes a second part of the controller that may not be a hardware controller, it might be software only, might have to be loaded through a separate driver that you download. So that's kind of the 411 on RAID, and it really has taken a real big, dramatic change from when we just had Novell and we had the IBM systems that were using proprietary drives. And, now we've got fast drives. The drives are becoming cheaper. The other thing I want to share with you, ladies and gentlemen, is that if you're putting in a RAID system, make sure that you buy some spare drives that are exactly the same, with the same cylinder count, same RAID, everything, because if they're not the same, guess what's going to happen? Your RAID's not going to work. So you have to make sure the drive sizes are exact, and it's always best to have the same manufacturers, same cylinders. I mean, they're just going to work the best. And that's really, really important. So if you have a system that's a little bit old and you just replace the drive, go ahead and buy a few extra drives. They're not going to, that extra $300 or $400 that you spend will probably be well worth it. At least buy 2 drives. So this way you're able to get up and running, and you'll probably still be able to dry those drives for another 3 or 4 years yet. So, but again, average life of a server is 5 to 10 years. So that's kind of how that works. But again, when we talk about technology, we talk about hard drives, we talk about systems, we talk about chips, we talk about ESD, electrostatic discharge. There's a lot of things that you have to know when you're working with computers or even servers. And why is this so important? Well, if you make a mistake, okay, you're not talking about something that's going to cost you $100. You're talking about a component that could be costing you anywhere from $200 to several $1,000s. Some processors cost over a few $1,000s. So if you do something wrong and you're not sure how to do something, well, not only could you have damaged that couple $1,000 component, but you might have damaged your motherboard. And guess what you've done? You inadvertently have damaged and ruined your warranty on that system. So again, it does pay to go to professionals like us. We've been doing this for a long time. We know technology, as you've heard before. But it's not just about knowing technology. It's about helping you get up and running with the technology in the best possible way. We know what's best for your practice. We know how things will work. We can advise you, and we can actually recommend the solution that is going to make the most sense from a cost perspective, performance perspective, and also a return on investment. Studies have shown, ladies and gentlemen, that people that actually have an IT company like us actually see their costs going down because they're not wasting time and money on other things. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to take another quick break. You stay right where you are, and we'll be right back after this break.
For IT services and data destruction, the JMOR connection should be your direction. Engineer technology to grow your business. Our custom solutions are at your service. JMOR should be your direction. The JMOR connection.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is John, and you are tuned in live to the JMOR Tech Talk Show. If you're listening from 9 p.m. Eastern to 9:57, we only have a little bit of time left. I don't know where the time goes, ladies and gentlemen, our show. I always enjoy this so much, and I love imparting knowledge onto all of you, because if I can just help one of you from having a technology disaster, or getting you to talk to someone like us or another professional if you're in another state, so that you can have the peace of mind. I always say that your business is important. Focus on working more on your business, and we'll take care of what needs to be done in your business. And that's what we do. So we'll take care of your technology, and you can get a good night's sleep. But as I've said to you guys before, I know the task of picking a technology company is not easy. You want a company that maybe has a lot of glitzy signs, or they have a very big portfolio, but I gotta tell you, that's not the key, ladies and gentlemen. The key is to have a company that doesn't do things cookie cutter. The companies, if I gave you a choice, and I've said this once before, if you could go to a $10 billion IT company, okay, the problem is, they're going to give you a cookie-cutter solution, or they're going to charge you such a fortune rate, and they're not going to be experienced with implementing that, because those companies don't do the specifics. They do cookie-cutter mass distribution. When you deal with a company like us, we actually go in and we engineer technology. That's part of our trademark. It is our trademark. Engineering technology to grow your business. It's not just a slogan. It's not just a trademark. It's what we do every single day. We talk to clients, we figure out what the solution is, and we tell you whether it makes sense to go this way. We advise you about what happens. We tell you if something needs to be done. We coordinate with other vendors. There's so much stuff that we plan and make sure, so that when we're doing a server upgrade, a server implementation, so that you understand what has to be done, so that you understand if there's any downtime. We explain to you that if you've never had a server, that we'll come in and do a training so your staff knows how to handle and use a server, how things are going to be slightly different with a server for like drive maps and things like that. So there's a lot, ladies and gentlemen, that really goes into it, and it's not just about getting a server for the right price and getting the right configuration. That's where it starts, ladies and gentlemen, but it doesn't end there. It continues on to the scheduling, to the delivering, to the planning, to the management of other companies that may need to be coordinated with us, such as copier companies, etc., other proprietary companies that may need to tie in, and making sure everyone's on board, or that you have phone calls set up. That's what it's about, so that when you get there, there isn't that, oh my gosh, what are we doing, right? That's what it's about, ladies and gentlemen. We actually care not only about technology and are very passionate about it, we care about you and we care about your business. And every client, whether they're spending $1 with us or $1 million or $1 billion, every client's important to us. So we want to build that relationship with you from the get-go, at the very initial onset. We want to be honest with you about what we can do for you and what kind of time frame, give you budgets, but we never like to give exact prices till we've had a chance to look at it, because worst thing we could do is give you a number, and then that's not right. So we're not fast to throw numbers out. We really want to look at it, and if somebody asks us for a range and we get pressured for it, we'll give you a range where we're like, hey, this isn't really accurate. This is a very high-end range. So, we really need to do more of of a study, and we do that. So again, technology is not just purchasing something, installing it, and saying, have a nice day, and pick up a check. No. That's what major multi-million-dollar companies do. And you know what happens with them? People don't complain with them because they're so big, and then they go back and they fix it. But you know, these large companies actually take 9 to 10 times to fix a problem. When we're called to fix a problem, do you know we fix that problem 99% of the time the first time? That's pretty good. What will drive that up to 1%? Microsoft kafluis, Ubuntu kafluis, Linux kafluis, and that might take a little bit of R&D. But still, that call is resolved 99% of the time that first time. And sometimes there's a second visit, and then we've resolved that call. It doesn't go to a third visit, ladies and gentlemen. We're really serious about what we do, and we don't sleep until we know your technology is running the way it should be. We want to exceed your expectations. We're located right here, ladies and gentlemen, in Franklin Lakes, New Jersey. We've been serving the area for quite a long time, and your business is an honor to us. And we do this show every single week because we want to impart knowledge to you about what needs to be considered. Whether you use us or another company, that's your choice. I mean, we hope you'll choose to use us, but when you're talking about technology, we want you to understand, what do you need to think about, right? What do you really have to think about? And that's what the show's about, to open your eyes, to teach you, so that you can be knowledgeable about what questions to ask, what to be alert for. That's what it's about, ladies and gentlemen. I look at it this way, and I tell all our sales reps the same thing. If we're able to help you, and we get the right solution for you, it's not about which solution would make us more money. It's about the solution that's going to help you be better than who you are today and allow your business to grow. We even talk to our clients about costs initially and long-term costs, because we want to make sure that the client understands that just by doing X, it could have a good ROI, but we want you to understand what the investment is going to be down the road for maintenance and things like that. One of the worst things tech companies can do is sell somebody a bill of goods or services and then falsely lie to them and tell them, well, gee, that's all you need to do, when really that's not the truth. So I hope tonight's show about RAID and about hard drives and about what's going on in our industry has been educational to all of you. I know a lot of you enjoy the shows. We get lots of emails and we get calls and chats. And if you have an idea for a show, you can always go online to JMOR.com. Just go to our chat window, or you can call us 24 hours a day and just let one of our friend representatives know, I listen to the show and I have a great idea for a show. I'd like to be a guest on a show. If you're a professional and you have something in technology, maybe you're in the medical field or some other field, and you have a piece of technology that is very specific and unique, we may want to talk to you, and we may invite you to be a guest on one of our shows. So, that's what it's about. It's about creating an awareness with people so that they feel comfortable with technology. And I look at technology, as I told you, as a tool. If we know which tool to use, we're going to be very successful. If you were a carpenter and you needed to, let's say, put up sheetrock, and you weren't screwing it, you were using a hammer, nails, you would use a hammer and nails. If you were doing it the untraditional way, which is a lot better and more expensive, you'd be using a screw gun and you'd be screwing them in, and that's the way a lot of good people do it. So it's all about using the right tools. If I had to cut a piece of wood, I may need a saw, right? I wouldn't try to cut a saw with a screwdriver or with a hammer. I would not get great results. If I tried to cut a piece of sheetrock with the wrong tool, like a hammer, I may cut it and it might look horrible, and then I'd have to spend more time, and it just wouldn't work. So if you use the right tools for the right job, you're going to get very, very good results. So picking the right technology company is number one. Getting that trust and bond built with them so that you can feel comfortable about whatever it is you need to discuss. if there's a problem you're having in your workforce with someone there, you need to have that camaraderie that they can be on your team and they can help you so that they can give you the best advice on how to combat problems. And your IT company also should be very close-lipped. When they go in there, they talk to the head C-level execs, but they're not talking to everybody about what they're doing. IT and security has become a very hush-hush field to companies, and that's because a lot of people, when they go to work today, they're sometimes trying to beat the system. And it's sad, but it does happen. So by IT and forensics, we're able to do things that mitigate these issues. Now, whether we're talking about a firewall, we're talking about enhanced security, we're talking about locking your network down so that people's bring-your-own devices that are not approved and authorized don't get on the network, whether we're restricting bandwidth, whether we are restricting the amount of time somebody can surf the net or what type of activities they can perform if they can or if they can't, as well as the type of content. It's all part of a plan. And if we can understand the plan of helping that company, it's a blueprint. And that blueprint is something that we all work on together, the IT company and the business. And it's a constant evolution of changes. And these changes will evolve based on our recommendations, feedback you give us, issues that come up, and we can tweak things to make it even better. I always say the more data you have, and that's why a lot of help desks are very successful. When you call them and they have so much data, it's because they can just do a quick search and they have a knowledge fact on it because, oh yeah, we had somebody with a similar issue such and such days ago, or we had someone with that same problem. That's what it's about, ladies and gentlemen. I always told you this once before. Knowledge is power, but many people don't care what knowledge you have until they know that you care about them and their business. We at JMOR do care about you, and we care about your business. And we consider it an honor, a privilege, and a pleasure to help you with any challenge that you have today or tomorrow. And we'll be there to hold your hand through every step of the way, or just to help you with those issues that maybe your internal IT team needs help with. Or be your complete internal IT team if you don't have your own IT support force. So again, either way, we can complement those large IT forces, and we're not looking to replace them. We're looking to augment and complement them because a lot of times they're doing things and they just don't have the time for some of these other things because they're so inundated with other tasks. And if you don't have an IT company, we'll be happy to be your outsourced IT company and help you start driving down costs and letting you know what's costing you money in your business. That's what it's about, ladies and gentlemen. And I hope that you can continue to enjoy the JMOR Tech Talk Show. We are almost out of time. I cannot believe, ladies and gentlemen, that we are actually in almost the middle of July. Can you believe that? I can't believe, ladies and gentlemen, that we've now been on national radio with you guys here in Starcom. I think it was January, February, March, April, June to July. We've been on almost 6 months now, five and a half months. We've been on Starcom Radio Network, and we just get great feedback. Love to have you call us. I know there's lots of great things that we can share with you, but we really want to hear those experiences, those challenges you're going through, and let us help you. Maybe you have a tip for our callers. Caller, you can call in and tell us something that happened to you. Share a story, get our feedback, ask your questions on the air, and we'll be happy to answer, of course, those quick questions that you have, or if you have comments about certain things, whether we've said or other people have said, or any type of things. Maybe you have questions about regulation, deregulation, policies, procedures of IT. There's so much stuff, that we can talk about. So we're a great venue. Of course, you can join us anytime, and you can listen to the show later on if you just go to jmor.com and then click on previously recorded episodes. So that's what I have for tonight. I hope tonight you've enjoyed the understanding of the different type of hard drives. We talked about the green, the black, the red. Well, the red was a little bit lower. We had the green, the red, the black, the gold, and then kind of in the middle there we had the purple, which was the 3-year, which was used for surveillance, because it's very intensive to do surveillance in those drives, and that's why the warranty on those drives is a little bit less, because a surveillance drive, it just takes a lot more of a beating. There's just a lot of data being written to them. Again, like I told you, SSD drives are great, but be cautious on them and don't buy the cheapest ones out there. Well, listen, this is John. I hope you've enjoyed the JMOR Tech Talk Show, and I got to go, so have yourself a wonderful week. From all of us at the JMOR Connection Incorporated, we'd like to thank you for listening and invite you to join us again next Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern. Be sure to tell your friends, colleagues, and associates about the JMOR Tech Talk Show. We're here every Thursday night on the Starcom Radio Network at 9 p.m. Eastern. If you missed any of our shows, you can just walk on over to jmor.com, click on social, and then under JMOR Radio, just click on previously recorded episodes. We'll see you next Thursday night at 9 p.m. Have a great week.